I'm missing anything. Yeah. And for me, I'm very excited to come back here because I remember this is kind of exactly the same room where I host another startup event at HBS when I was back in 2015, when I was still a graduate student at Kennedy School. It is exactly the event like this and amazing stories and experience from those inspiring founders that made me make up my mind to drop out and then went back to Beijing to join in AI startup, which turned out to be a 1 million unicorn in China nowadays. And it was an amazing journey and eventually led me to join the Binance Labs today. So I was hoping that all the stories shared and experience told by our founders and our Binance CEO Ella today can also bring you the same inspiration and maybe lead you to some wonderful and exciting new journey. So let me give you a brief introduction of all the speakers today. First is CEO of Binance Labs, Ella Zhang, who is also working for the KBCB and Google and Tencent and all the main and leading tech companies in China before. And we also have two campus ambassadors here, also from Binance team. Charles Liu, who is our, do you want to say hi to everyone? Yeah. Who is currently a PhD student at Stanford University, and we also have Haibo Zhao.
Hey guys, I'm a JD student here, and local contact with
yeah, who is also helping to organize the event today, and he's currently a HBS student and JD at law school, right? Okay. And we also have the founder and CEO of Basis, which is one of the most famous stable coins in crypto markets nowadays, and it is also a former Googler and graduated from Princeton University. And we also have the founder and CEO of CertiK, Wu, who graduated from Tsinghua, got a PhD at Yale University, and currently assistant professor at Columbia University. And we also have Harry Zhou, founder and co-founder of Coil Trading, which is also one of the portfolios of Binance. And Harry is also a Harvard alumni. He holds a JD degree from the Harvard Law School, and he used to be the GM of another leading crypto exchanges in the world, but now he joined Binance now. So this is all the speaker today, and thank you so much for Bill, Justin, and Beth, and the others, all the students who helped to organize the event tonight. So let's welcome Ella to the stage, and she will give us a brief introduction of Binance Labs so that you can learn more about us.
Do you want a regular mic? Or?
I think my voice is not that good.
Test.
Okay. Yes, I can see some energy. Amazing campus here. I'm trying to click in some dots. I really have good memory here at this campus. I'm from the other school from West Coast, at Stanford. But when I was at Stanford, I flew here every month because I was dating someone here from Harvard. And then boyfriend now become my husband, and we have a lovely daughter now. So I have a lot of amazing memory here. Really happy back here. So give a oh, can I have a controller? So who will control the side? Okay. Okay. So today, a small correction. I'm not the CEO of Binance, but I'm a CEO of Binance Labs, which is the investing arm of Binance. So today, it's our honor to share with everyone here. I'm gonna briefly introduce Binance and also what we're doing at Binance Labs. And then I believe there's a lot of students from business school. So combine my background from venture capital, I'm gonna talk about my transitioning from VC and now to the crypto investors. hope you like it. And we will have a question Q&A after this, after my talk. So feel free to stop me anytime and ask questions. Introducing Binance. Binance, the previous slide. So how many people know Binance here? Oh, thank you. We are honored. Binance now is so far the world's most popular crypto exchange in terms of the trading volume, the traffic, and the user bases. Yeah, so Binance's mission is to spread the freedom of money. This is really came from the belief of the founder, Changpeng Zhao, which we call him in short CZ. He's a Bitcoin believer. When he knew Bitcoin in 2013, he immediately went fully convinced by the concept and sold out all his assets and exchange it into Bitcoin. He's a long-term holder. And then in 2013, I think at the same time, he joined OKCoin, then one of the first cryptocurrency exchange, become the CTO there. Then maybe after half a year he left, and because of the some partnership issue going on, and then fortunately he did another startup completely focused on doing the exchange backend platform for all the clients, and delivered more than 30 different versions of exchanges infrastructures. Then when the time ready, Binance was founded in 2017, and then within a year become the biggest cryptocurrency exchanges. So yeah, this is after a year, Binance now we have over 10 million users from over 180 countries, and we established a team of 300 people, passionate people about the cryptocurrency and blockchain. We are from over 40 countries, and now the website support 13 languages. So Binance is famous for the feature, the function, and the performance is very fast. Now our infrastructure supports the transaction percent is more than 1 million transactions per second. And another thing Binance is famous for is it's not like a centralized exchange aimed for profit, but on the opposite side, it starts from a centralized exchange, but aim to deliver the decentralized exchange. Hopefully, by the end of the year, we're gonna deliver it. But so far, the transaction fee is very low. It's 10 basis point. If you use BNB as a utility token to pay for it, it's only 5 basis points. 7.5 now. Okay, thank you. Why not? Yeah, and so at Binance we have unified the value that to put the users' interests, our investors' interests as the first priority. So a whole team work towards protecting the interests of the users. We have very rigid and strict selection process for the project to be listed on the exchange. Overall, we have the less than 3% acceptance rate of the project to be listed. And any project to be listed on Binance will immediately gain over 50% market volume from the entire cryptocurrency exchange world. And also, we very much focus on the satisfaction of the users. We have a 24/7 customer service team globally, because cryptocurrency exchange is 24/7. We have our customer service 24/7, and we get 80% of our ticket to be solved within 24 hours. And at the latest survey, we get the 90% satisfaction rate from our users. And now, after a year, Binance from a startup start to build up its ecosystem. So here are I'll introduce the logos. Here, the first one is Academy. So Binance Academy is aimed to provide the very basic knowledge to the normal users to educate mass users. And the second one is called Launchpad. It's a platform aimed to help startups to do the token sales. You can also call it as IEO, Initial Exchange Offering Platform. After we launch our decentralized exchange, the DEX will mainly focus on providing a decentralized ICO platform. The third one is our charity foundation. Now, the main revenue stream for Binance is transaction fee and the listing fee. So last month, the founder decided to make an announcement that we're gonna donate all our listing fee to the charity foundation. And last week at a conference in Geneva, and he announced that we're gonna make infrastructure to make all our donation transparent, so everyone can check and tracking the donation source and destination. And the middle one is the logo Binance, and the fifth one is the Binance Labs. I'm gonna introduce later on. And the last two, the icon is a Binance Info. The Info platform aims to provide all the information of the listed project to educate our investors, to let them know what kind of asset you are invested in. So we require all the listed projects to send us an update every week, if not bi-weekly. If you're not sending us the bi-weekly, we have a delisting process to delist the project. So, and to protect the users, let them know all the information. The last one is a project we acquired 3 months ago. It's called Trust Wallet. It's a 100% open source, decentralized wallet. It became the official wallet of Binance. So what is Binance Labs? Binance Labs is, by definition, is an investing arm of Binance. The founder is really, so if you think about it, after Ethereum founded, and the biggest application on the blockchain is actually crypto trading. And all the success of Binance is actually based on the thrive of the future industry. So the founder really commits to give 1/4 of our annual revenue to invest in this industry, to help other amazing founders, builders, to make this industry thrive. So our mission at Binance Labs is to realize the full potential of blockchain. But if it's only a small team at Binance Labs, how can we realize the full potential of blockchain? So we lay out this initiative of Binance Labs to incubate, invest, and empower the top founders, top blockchain and cryptocurrency entrepreneurs, projects, and community. So working together, hopefully we can make more use cases, bring more use cases of blockchain in the field. So Binance, we have 3 directions at Binance Labs. We do incubation and direct investment, and the founder-of-fund investing. So at the incubation program, it's a 10 weeks on-site program that basically we provide 500K either in USD or BNB to the founders who have the initial idea and want the help from us. We help them to jumpstart the idea. The direct investment, we invest in the ongoing project in this field. Also, the fund-of-fund business, we are willing to provide our capital to those partners who also are the crypto funds who have the shared long-term vision as us do, but maybe they have a different approach from us. So we would love to provide the funding to them, become their LPs. But overall, our goal is to identify those problems which are the roadblocks of this whole industry and help this industry to thrive. So the focus area of this is the focus area at our current stage. Those are the problems we figured out are the major roadblocks now to slow down the development of the industry. And so at the left-hand side, you can see the blockchain infrastructure, the scalability issue, and privacy, interoperability, on-chain governance consensus, and off-chain private computation, and also smart contract development. For example, CertiK here is our portfolio who is provide the formal verification of all the smart contracts. It's aimed to provide a secure environment for the investors. So this is the kind of, just give you a taste of what the kind of project we are looking for. And also on the right-hand side, we said decentralized exchange is a major focus of Binance now. We want to launch our DEX the end of this year. Also, we are looking for solutions outside of that of Binance, because maybe there are a lot of issues like front-running issues of the DEX can be solved by other developers. We also like to back out them. Also, the price stability issue is also the major problem the mass adoption of cryptocurrency. And here today we have a portfolio basis, and they are using a novel way to come up the stable coin here. He may introduce a little bit more later on. And also the infrastructure level wallet payment custody service, which is a user interface. We really spend a lot of effort, time, and money in this category. The compliance and the regulatory area is one of the category we also keep our eyes on, and we had two portfolios so far. And Harry, Harvard alum, he's now focused on like fully compliant trading, cryptocurrency trading desk, which is also in our interest zone, and decentralized applications. This is a big issue of the entire industry that everyone here may know that lack of the real use cases in the industry, and we really want to help those founders to find out those the real use cases in different countries. And, here's a landscape of our investment. So far, Binance Labs has established for half a year, and we invested in 23 projects here, deployed 33 million equivalent USD. And those projects you can see focus in the major problems we mentioned previously. And those projects with the yellow square is 8 projects came from our first batch of incubation program. They are now in San Francisco, focused on building, so no logo, still in stealth mode. Hopefully, they will deliver their idea, and we will host our Builders Day in December 14th in San Francisco. So what makes us different? There are so many crypto funds in the industry. What make Binance Labs different? So here I use 3 words: HODL, BDL, and global. So HODL is actually a typo in the Bitcoin industry that someone called for the investors to hold the Bitcoin, not selling it, but it's kind of typo, but become very famous. So at Binance Labs, we really have a long horizon of our investment scope. Any project we invest in, we for sure won't sell it right after its ICO, of course, and we are willing to be locked up as long as the founders do. This is our first differentiation. Build is that into so we have an investing team of 6 people. All the people in our team actually have startup experience, previous founders. So we like to get our hands dirty to build up the startups together with our founders. At our incubation program, we really sit in the incubation site every day to brainstorming with them and help them recruiting and introduce the useful resources. The third of all, global. This is a very different thing from traditional VC. So traditional VC is more focused on the regional founders network. You get to know the local culture and the local founders, and you invested in the local network. But from day one, Bitcoin and the blockchain is a global thing. So we, as Binance Labs team, we built up a distributed team based in Africa, US, Asia, and we're now looking for people from Latin America, South America, and also Europe. If anyone in this crowd are interested in Binance Labs, should reach out afterward. This is the current team of 6 people. Lin is here, the 4th one. It's a very young team. We aim to expand this team to 15 to 20 people. So a lot of openings now. Everyone should reach out. This is email is Lin's email. Send your CV to her afterward. And transitioning, I will just share my experience of opinions of myself, not represent other investors and other any institutions. So the past half a year really it's experience disrupt myself, my own thinking. Introduce a little bit about myself. Lin, can you go to the next slide? So I started from an engineer at a telecom company and joined the Tencent and Google to work on different product and operational roles. And before I joined VC, so in 2010 I joined Clara Perkins, become a junior venture capitalist in the industry, very passionate every day. But until I left the KP to start my first startup, and that was a failure of mine, and really at my valley at that time. But it's a big game. Afterwards, I think about it, and then KP still think I'm very valuable to them, so recruit me back and even promoted me. So I have a short time before I came to the GSB, working back at the KPCB. But the second time I worked at the Clara Perkins, really I feel I've become more mature because of the failure as a founder. And during the 2 years at GSB, I also did another startup focused on NLP. And now it's still going, but I deliver everything to my co-founder. It's after Series B fundraising, everything is going well. And now so after GSB, I really have to think of what is the biggest thing matters to me the most. And I really believe the future of blockchain, the future impact of blockchain and cryptocurrency. Basically, in the VC world, after I gained the empathy as a founder, I really think I still gonna disrupt it with venture capital. So this is my personal belief. So kick out the gatekeeper is a good thing. If I'm a good founder, why I have to let you decide should I back your success, your future success? It's really depend on yourself. Blockchain is really in the field. You trust nobody but yourself. So I believe in the future. I feel. If you look at the stats, in 2017, the return of Bitcoin is much higher than any category of the asset investment compared to the real estate, gold, US equity, global equity. Yeah, this is a shock, and also attract a lot of more investors coming to this industry. Also create a lot of problems. ICO fundraising at the Q3 of 2017, it's already exceeded the total funding raised by ICO already exceeds the VC investing. And go back to the first slides. Many people ask, what do you think about the scams in this industry? Yeah, I've been asking about this question for many times. So my question is that this is at the stage where the industry have a lot of excitement and a lot of hope and hype. If you think back to 1999, every players use the .com as the end to try to go public. It's also a huge bubble behind that. But in the end, a lot of them did go public, and they released a valuable project after that. So we think the current ICO thing have a lot of unhealthy things going on. It's really because of the stage. Doesn't mean the mechanism of the ICO is wrong. This is my personal belief. So think about what is unchanged principle as a VC investor and crypto investor. I think pretty much still focus on two things. One, the founders. We're really looking for the top natural founders who have great vision and have a lot of ideas and really can execute lean and pivot really fast. And they have strong execution to try out different things. And also resilience is a very important characteristic we look into the founders who are going to be successful. And survivability. That means you have to be really practical in this industry. At the same time, keep your great vision. That means you have a goal at there. You are now here. How can you survive and gradually deliver your stuff? This is the combination of the great factors we are looking for. And also the product. Product market fit is really, really important. A lot of projects came to pitch us, but without a sound product market fit. The first question we're gonna ask is that why the native token is necessary in your whole design, in your system. You have to think about it, why you need a token in your system to push you have a better product fit. And also your go-to-market strategy, it matters a lot. And, but there are a lot of differences investing in VC and investing. This is my own summary just before this meetup. Never shared anywhere. This is the first time. Correct me if you think it's wrong. Challenge me and discuss with me. I would love to discuss about that. So venture capital is really, the run structure is very different. Venture capital, you raise funds gradually. You raise bigger funds later on when you do more. But ICO, crypto investing, you really raise a big round, a big chunk at the beginning. And you have a big liability to deliver all your product and service you promise in your white paper. And also, venture capital, they are looking for the real gatekeepers, the marketplace. They are looking for those ones who can become the winner takes all players. This is a venture model. But in crypto world, it's really democratization the economy. It's the whole mission of blockchain is to disrupt the gatekeeper. So it's very different thinking. If you look at the founders' mindset, it's very challenging. They have to build up and distribute it and decentralize the system. At the same time, keep the competitive advantages. Also, invest in the secret power. It's a VC model. You really have to have the secret competitive advantages to become the leading player. But in the blockchain space, everything is open source and everything is transparency. How can you become become the real leader, you open source everything, you can still lead the trend, just like Vitalik. So in the VC model, the companies that really monetize the data and the privacy of their users. But in crypto projects, the key feature is anonymous and privacy. So protect the user's privacy is the first priority of many projects. And the regional, as I mentioned previously, VC is a regional business. You have the local network and you have the advantage to write the track in the top-notch offenders. But from the day one, blockchain and crypto is a global thing. How to become a global player as an institution or as an individual player and investor, you have to think about it, where is your strength. And the last one I think is very important of the spirit. In venture capital, I think a lot of things are like authoritarian and individualistic and heroism. But in the crypto investing, it's all about libertarian and trust no one but yourself. So now, yeah, this is my sharing today. Hope you have different. Yeah, I will leave the time to our founders to introduce their project. If you have more questions, we can discuss after this. We can have a Q&A session together. Okay.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you for sharing in terms of our traditional investors from to crypto investor. And that's one. Let's invited Eric Ronhui-Gu to the stage, and he will share about his experience in cryptos from another angle.
Okay, cool. Okay, hello everyone. So, yeah, sorry. So I'm Ronhui-Gu. So I'm now an assistant professor of computer science department at Columbia University, and I'm also the co-founder of this CertiK company. You can also call it CertiK, right? So this is a company that aims for building fully trustworthy smart contracts and blockchain ecosystems. So we all know that blockchain is very popular during the past 2 years. And so what's so special about blockchain? So we can view it as the world computer, and the applications or software running on top of this world computer are what we call dApps, decentralized apps or smart contracts, right? So different from the traditional computer systems that compute and transfer data, this new world computer will manage and transfer values or properties. Kind of like it has to be trustworthy because it manages billions of dollars. Well, so if you ask people that why Bitcoin has a price, why it's so expensive, right? So some of them may tell you that this price or their values are based upon trust, and even call it a belief. But the code itself, the implementation itself is now trustworthy. Yeah, so we can see all these attacks, right, which happens again and again in the crypto world. Take the DAO attack as an example. The single bug in the code causes double spam attacks and leads to more than $13 million financial loss. And actually, in last December, in a single month, the financial loss related to this attacks have reached $600 million, which is really a lot. And also different from traditional software systems, these smart contracts and dApps are open source. Meaning what? Meaning those hackers can read your source code, find bugs, and utilize those bugs to attack your software. And once being deployed, these smart contracts and dApps are really hard to get fixed or get changes. So we need to reach a very high level of reliability and security. So here in this figure, I just list a bunch of techniques we can use to improve the reliability of system software. And the x-axis is what we call reliability, and the y-axis is the feasibility. It's how easily that technique can be applied. And at the left bottom is what we call human review. Now we give it a new name. We call it code auditing, right? I don't really want to call it a technique, but it is indeed the most widely used one in the blockchain world. It's just they try to invite some so-called expert, maybe, so maybe has some bachelor degree in computer science, and they will read your source code, try to find bugs, and try to help you fix the issues. So you can see it's not that reliable, and also it's not that feasible. And next one is runtime monitor, which is widely used in the distributed systems, but it's not that suitable for blockchain setting because it may burn gas, and also, as I said, it's really hard to fix bugs even if you can detect it using this monitor. So the next one is what we call shadow verification. So they try to prove that your smart contract satisfies a bunch of properties, like there's no stack overflow. But you can see these lists of properties or this shadow specifications are still not enough. Then we have testing. Well, this is the most famous one, I believe. But we know that program testing can only be used to show the presence of bugs, but never to show their absence, right? By the digestrums, right? So it still does not fit our goal. And now I want to introduce the solutions that's proposed by CertiK, that we want to combine what we call fully formal verification plus a deep specification. So this formal verification mean to use mathematical ways to prove that your code, your implementation, indeed satisfy your intention, or what we call specification. And the next step is deep specification. Well, this specification has to be deep. It has to capture all the behaviors of this piece of code, and hopefully it can enable something what we call modular verification to scale this technique. And with this combination, we can do it mostly automated and can generate machine checkable proofs, meaning that you don't need to trust me because I'm an expert, or you don't need to trust our company. You can check these proofs on your hardware, on your laptop. So here I will give one example to show the difference between the testing and the formal verification. So, for example, if we want to write a piece of code that implement this very simple functionality, that we're trying to compute the square of x plus 1, which is very easy, right? We can write this, we can try to implement this specification, try to implement this intention using whatever languages you want to use, like C, C++, Java, Python. Here I use pseudocode, right? We try to compute this square by x plus x times x plus 1, right? And then once we implement the functionality, we want to test, we want to check about it's indeed correct, right? So we can run some testing by trying to run the code using some test inputs, like x equals to 0. When we run the program with x equals to 0, we got the result 1. And we compare with the specification, it's also 1. We find that, well, these two match. And then we run another test case with x equal to 1, and and we find that, well, both sides are equal. So now we claim that, well, this program is correct, but actually it's not that reliable, right? No, sorry, okay, yeah. For example, let's see if we remove, if we mistakenly write a code like x plus x plus x plus 1, right? If you run this test these two test cases, well, it still gives you the correct answer, but that code indeed has a bug. So we want to avoid that case. So this is by formal verification. So by formal verification, we're trying to prove that this code and the specification are indeed equivalent using some mathematical rules or theorems. Like here, we can apply the associative law and do the factorizing and so on. And then we can apply the rules and to show that these two things are actually equivalent. And this list of rules that we apply to show the equivalence are what we call machine checkable proofs. Okay, so then this is deep specification. So we can view, so deep specification can be visualized as this triple, right? It has an underlying interface L1 and a code implementation M and a higher level interface L2. Or we can call this L2 a deep specification if it captures all we need to know about running this module M over the underlying interface L1. And any property of this implementation M can be reasoned about using L2 alone. And there's no, once you do the proof, there's no need to ever look at this implementation, this code M again. Yeah, so with the help of this deep specification, we can achieve the modular verification, right? We can do the horizontal composition, yeah, like this. If two deep specifications share the same underlying interface, and we can also do a vertical composition like this if they share some adjacent interfaces. And we can even build the layers at C level, use compiler to compile it to the assembly level, and link with other assembly codes that's manually verified. And then if it's a concurrent setting or distributed setting, we can even compose them in parallel. So this is how we achieve the modular verification. So I will skip this example. Basically, this shows, basically this shows how we can use this approach to decompose the verification of the OS kernel into many small pieces and then compose them together. Yeah, like this. Go on. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll skip this part. Yeah, but you can see the animation. Yeah. Yeah. So it takes us about 37 layers to verify OS kernel, and it is also this OS kernel was deployed on this Landshark machine, which is a future military robotics, and has been tested by the right team. Go ahead. Yeah, then we try to apply this military-grade protection to the blockchain world and start this company called CertiK or CertiK. And this co-founded by me and Professor Zhong Shao, who is a computer science department chair at Yale University, and we have many other researchers, research scientists, and developers on board. Yeah, so we introduced this deep spec. So this is the history of our company. So we introduced this deep spec concept in 2015, and then in 2016, this was widely studied by a broader community, including Yale, Princeton, MIT, UPenn. Unfortunately, Harvard is not in our community, but we will try to get them in and move them in. Yeah, and then we developed CertiK to realize this deep spec and build this CertiK class. And then in 2017, we extended CertiK to support the formal verification of smart contracts. Yeah. And it has been published in many top-tier conference papers and widely considered as a breakthrough. Yeah, so I will skip this part because this is how we use this technique to help verify the smart contract, how to decompose the smart contract, how to add labels, and deliver the certificate. So this is a running example. This is demo, right? So this is a code of the beauty chain. And when we upload the code in our system, we write some specifications showing this comments. You click one button, it will detect this bug, and also show how you can trigger this bug. And this bug lead to more than around the $2 billion coin price crash when this attack happens. Yeah. So we have invested and incubated by Binance Labs. Ella has already introduced, and we have already been collaborated with many big exchanges, including yeah, I will skip this part. So we also collaborated with many public chains and served many clients in the domain. And it'd be great if we can skip to the last page. And the most important thing is we are hiring. We are hiring. So if you have interest, whatever, we are hiring in our development team, we're hiring our sales team and marketing team. So if you have interest, just send emails to your CV to job@certik.org. You can also send CV to Lee. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I don't know how you guys feel, so every time I very much enjoy Eric's lecture. I learned something new. And if anyone from the CS backgrounds or technical background who are interested in learn more, welcome to talk to Eric after the event. So next one, let's go for less technical and diving into the financial world. Let's welcome Nader, founder and CEO of Basis.
Thanks everybody. I actually don't have slides. We're just gonna talk to you guys. Before I get started, I'm actually wondering how many people are pretty familiar with stable coins as a concept? Can you raise your hand? Okay, good, most people. And then I had another question, just a different question. How many people want to start their own business at some point? Okay, a lot of people. Okay, good. So I was going to first tell you a little bit about what Basis is for context, but then because it's not enough time to really go deep into it, I was maybe going to tell you the story of how Basis got started, which is just kind of an interesting entrepreneurship experience. Before we go into that, just a little bit about Basis. So at a high level, what we're trying to do with Basis is essentially deliver the benefits of Bitcoin without the volatility in price. And what that means essentially is if you think about Bitcoin, there are a few key properties that we think are very valuable. One of them is that when you have your Bitcoins, it's very difficult for someone to take them away from you. They can't really freeze your account or close down your account or anything like that. It's accessible to anyone with an internet connection, and it's pretty difficult to block from a high level. And it's fault tolerant in the sense that there's not really an entity you can shut down that then the whole system goes down. Those properties together form something we call censorship resistance, and we think it's a very valuable property for money to have, especially given its influential role in our economy and all that. And really what we're trying to do is take that censorship resistance property of Bitcoin and create a cryptocurrency that is stable in value in addition to having that property. So first of all, just talking about Bitcoin and what we mean by volatility is basically its value fluctuates a lot, right? That fluctuates at about 15% per day. And an interesting thing that is often not fully understood by especially people who have been in Bitcoin for a long time is that Bitcoin will actually never really have its value stabilized. In general, it will always be a fairly volatile asset relative to things you probably want to buy in the economy. So for example, if you want to mark Bitcoin's value against a basket of goods, you're never really going to see that stabilize anywhere near the extent to which a fiat currency in general can be stabilized against a basket of goods. And the reason for that really is if you look at Bitcoin, it's fundamentally a fixed supply currency, which means that if demand fluctuates for Bitcoin, which can happen for all sorts of reasons, the value of it has to fluctuate. This is very different from traditional currencies, which are almost all of them are elastic supply. And the reason why they're elastic supply, one of the biggest reasons, is not so they can inflate on you and devalue your money and just steal it, to have the government steal your money, although that does unfortunately happen. But the reason, actually why, the useful reason is you can use it to keep the price stable, the purchasing power of the currency stable in general, among other things. And so the high level of what Basis is doing is basically looking at Bitcoin and saying the blockchain is an extremely useful technological innovation that can bring you censorship resistance plus a database. And to basically take Bitcoin and modify its rules so that instead of it being a fixed supply currency, it's actually an elastic supply currency, and that's what Basis is. Basis is a cryptocurrency that is on the blockchain that's stable in value while trying to be censorship resistant. Early on, when we launched Basis, which we haven't launched yet, but we're going to launch in the next few months, it is a centralized currency backed by assets, but in the long run it moves to this monetary policy phase, which is elastic supply, as I mentioned. So there's a lot of information on our website. I won't go too much deeper into it, but that's how Basis works. Basically, oh, there you go, it's our website. Cool. Yeah, actually, yes, I think that's pretty good. I don't know if you want to, I'll tell you a little bit about how we got started, because it's a fun story. So I got interested in Bitcoin in 2013, and it's funny because I read the paper and thought it was cool, but then I got obsessed with it when I realized there was free electricity on Princeton campus, because basically that means electricity means free Bitcoins, because you can mine it. And so my friends and I basically got started doing electricity arbitrage at Princeton in 2013. And because of just getting my own Bitcoin, being like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. You literally convert electricity into money, and then no one knows that you have it, and no one can take it away from you. It's a very interesting vision. So I got interested in how money works. I took a couple of courses on monetary theory and monetary history. And I was basically the biggest troll in these classes because basically the professor has studied money like her entire life and is talking about how having an elastic supply is useful. And I'm like, I don't think you need that. Bitcoin works perfectly fine, and it'll be stable one day, this and that. What happened was I basically went to office hours. I very rarely went to office hours in college. Went to 4 office hours in a row, fighting this professor, taking Bitcoin maximalist view against her love of fiat currency and how it works. And then became convinced that it's going to be very difficult for Bitcoin to cross the chasm to being used in the mainstream without adjusting its rules to be doing something to have it be more stable in value. And so in college we were trying to actually add some rules to the basically create a Bitcoin fork that could implement this stability, but we couldn't figure out a way to do it without compromising on Bitcoin's decentralization and censorship resistance, which are the most important properties. And so basically, tried that, didn't work. Then there was this giant crash, and I had a job lined up. I went to work at D.E. Shaw after I graduated from college, and then went to work at Google for 3 years. And at Google, I got interested in crypto again because of Ethereum. Ethereum was this really interesting, you could have a programming language on top of Bitcoin, which enabled a lot of things. In particular, it enabled the idea for Basis. And so, I had a blog in college, and I wrote about crypto, wrote about Basis, basically the white paper for Basis, and decided that I was going to leave to do it. And what was funny was this was in May 2017, and I wrote this blog post about Basis, and I started getting inbounded from these random people who want to invest in the concept. And they were all random people, whatever, I'm just gonna leave and do this. Satoshi did it by himself, I can do it by himself. I can do it by myself. Anyway, what happened was I put in my 2 weeks notice, and my first week at Google, my first week of 2 weeks notice, I was inbounded by Naval Ravikant, who's a pretty legit angel investor in Silicon Valley, saying, hey, I read your blog, I really like it, let's meet up. And I was like, oh, okay, Naval's an actual person, not some random anonymous dude who has a bunch of ETH money on the internet. And so I met with him, we talked for 3 hours, and he was like, hey, you shouldn't do this by yourself, you should raise money, you'll get a lot of credibility, you'll get a lot of help, take this thing, make it much bigger, much faster. And so, we worked on a term sheet, and, basically, first week of 2 weeks notice was term sheet, second week was Google work, and then I left to go to Silicon Valley to do a round, and from there we recruited my best friends as co-founders, and got to work, raised more money, and here we are. So yeah, that's kind of the story, and yeah, if you want to learn more, feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Nader. That was actually the second time I hear about the mining story at college. It's still fun. Yeah, next one, let's welcome Harry, who's going to share a little bit more about crypto trading, and which I guess most of the students will be really interested in this topic. Thank you.
you so much, Dean, and thank you so much, Ella, for inviting me here. So you may think they stacked me as the last one because of the boring lawyer in the room that says no to everything. And no, that's not what I do. Because now I'm the co-founder of this OTC trading desk. It's called Koi Trading. We are the bridge that connect fiat liquidity and cryptocurrency liquidity. Maybe there's one day that fiat will be eliminated, but before that happens, this bridge will still be helpful. And we are in the very challenging position of constantly having to negotiate both with entities that regulate banks and with banks themselves in order to achieve what we do today. So what do we mean by providing liquidity? There are three main forms of liquidity provisioning that we engage in today in a compliant US-based way currently. One most obvious thing that's in our name, we do OTC trading, over-the-counter trading. So if you happen to hold a large quantity of whatever digital asset and you want to convert it into or from fiat currency, we can do it in a private, efficient, and compliant way. That's the most basic one. And secondly, now that there's this hybrid product that's called stablecoin, most of which are collateralized on a one-to-one basis by one or more or basket of fiat currency. And the other school of stablecoin would be like basis here, that's what we call algorithm-backed stablecoin. So for the first kind of hybrid asset that combines the trade of both a fiat currency and a crypto asset, we can be the bridge that provides the compliant collateralization for you. So say you have the technology, you have the operational capacity, we can be your fiat backend that allows you to launch your own stablecoin project easily and without almost any friction. And finally, now that we have a lot of dealers, exchangers, or administrators in virtual currencies that are running things like broker-dealers or quasi-broker-dealers and exchanges around the world, whenever they need liquidity, say they want to have quasi-fiat capacity, we can be their backend as well. So that pretty much covers everything we do, and before my co-founder calls me and says he hates me, I have to mention this one thing, we're hiring as well. So if you have experience working for a US regulated broker-dealer, and anything that the name of which ends with Securities Inc., come talk to us. So because we are hiring aggressively, we will have New York desk, Hong Kong desk, and San Francisco, and you can have your pick of place. So that covers everything that we do a little bit. So also before I end here, because I think I have a couple more minutes, I want to cover something that I have seen from being in this industry for about 5 years. When I first got started as a lawyer out of law school, I was still in the shadow of the financial crisis. So all I learned in law school, across the river over there, is about this thing that's called Dodd-Frank Act. And it's many rules like the Volcker rules and the living will rules. So for a little bit, for about 1 to 2 years when I first got started, that's all I did in New York at one of the largest law firms in the world. So I helped banks like HSBC, Deutsche Bank comply with the Dodd-Frank Act, a lot of the regulations promulgated thereunder, as well as the Bank Secrecy Act, which governs the anti-money laundering aspect of their compliance obligations. So in about 2014, New York State Department of Financial Services proposed this thing that's called bid license regulation. That was then in proposed draft form. And the language was drafted so broadly that it would capture an overseas exchange even if it unintentionally dealt with one single New York resident. And the definition of New York resident is someone that has ever domiciled in New York. So say if you spend, say, 17 days in New York and you express the sort of subjective intention that, this is a great place that I want to live in permanently, you are a New York domiciled person. And that was subject to this overseas exchange to fingerprinting requirement of all of its employees, among other things. So the then 3 largest cryptocurrency exchanges, 2 of which shall not be named, and the last of which CZ served as a CTO at a time, they wanted to contact a a U.S. lawyer that did bank regulatory law in the state of New York that undergraduated with an undergraduate degree in computer science and speaks Chinese. So that's me. So I helped drafted this joint comments on my license, submitted it, and we successfully got the New York DFS to change some language in the proposal. And for all of you who work with New York DFS, you know that's kind of hard to do, to convince them to change their mind. Funny story, lost the person who drafted the New York bit license form with this other guy called Dana. Immediately after the bit license was enacted into law, they both retired and joined private practice to advise companies on complying with the bit license, and law school subsequently joined this project called Ripple as an advisor. So that's how I first got started with working with the blockchain company. Of course, I'm an early believer in Bitcoin myself. So personally, I've seen 3 stages of global regulation, how it evolved over the years. First stage, called disinterest. The regulators took the collective belief that blockchain concept, it's such a transient thing that not even schemers will be interested in it because it's not even a good enough instrument for fraud. So at a time in about 2012, 2013, the regulatory approach was to not say anything at all. And it's one of the reasons why Coinbase, when it first got started, had to operate without any license for a period of about 7 months. And then it was immediate reaction, knee-jerk reaction, the second stage. It's called fear. So when fear kicked in, when they see that maybe blockchain is here to stay and how it did not conform with their conventional understanding of how the world should run, then fear kicked in, and some country outside of the US took what we call broad-based, blunt instrument approach of shutting down anything that's crypto-related, including China. So now we're in the third stage of regulation, and it's very obvious in the US. It's when regulators trying to think hard and smart about how we can promote innovation while at the same time eliminating the traditional risk that's been emanated by any kind of financial innovation in the history of human investment. And that's a great thing for blockchain companies because that means that there are competitions among the regulators themselves. For example, here in the US, we see that CFTC is trying to take a very expensive read of what constitutes commodity, what kind of digital asset are commodity and not securities, so that they can indirectly reach the spot market of those assets through its general anti-fraud and market integrity authority. And the SEC is taking somewhat the opposite approach in trying to read into their Howey test and saying everything to security. And recently they reached this a compromise in a very important blog article that all of us should read, at least those who are law students. It's called When Howey Met Gary. So it's a very important piece note that everybody should read. And then you have this agency that everybody tends to forget. It's called OCC, with a very weird name that you would think it's perfectly designed for regulating cryptocurrency. The full name is called the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Right? So the OCC. So you would really think it's the agency that you would have to regulate cryptocurrency, but it's not. It was the agency that was first created in the US, in this country, to promote the first national currency at the time, because at that time it was legal for all the banks to issue their own fiat currency. So they made this agency, OCC, and say, hey, let's have one single currency in the United States. They wanted to be Bitcoin at the time, but it failed. So Federal Reserve Note, and that's the real US dollars you have today. If you read it, it says Federal Reserve Note. It was first started as an interbank settlement instrument. It was not for retail circulation. So now the OCC is the federal primary regulator of federal member bank and state member bank. So it's trying to make this new charter happen. It's called FinTech Charter. It's very interesting. If you read the press release, it's a charter for a fintech company that are not engaging in banking activity. So while the banking regulator issued this kind of charter, go figure that. It's way of trying to get into fintech regulation like blockchain. So now all the regulators are trying to compete in this regulatory land grab in saying that this belongs to us. And that's great for all the founders around here and for all the professionals who are trying to join the industry, because finally we have a time when the regulator of a major country is trying to think smart, and they are being smart. If you read some of Vincent's actions against this now non-existent exchange called BTCE, they displayed tremendous understanding of how cryptocurrency fits into their AML regulations. So now they're trying to get smart, they're trying to get smarter, and it's time for all of us to actively engage with them and not have our hands tied, to try to expand their comfort zone so that we can prove to them that blockchain is the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Very inspiring. That was very exciting. And let's welcome our last speaker, Charles, who is our researcher at Binance Labs, and he is going to share a little bit about his opinions and his experience in Binance Labs, and also a little bit about how to do the research of blockchain.
Cool, all right. I can do it. All right, well, thanks everyone for coming. I thought it would be pretty cool to talk about, so I'm Charles. I'm mostly a PhD in computer science at Stanford, working on blockchain research, and I'm also part of the Binance Labs team. So I think it'd be pretty cool to talk about, why I'm so excited about doing research in the space. Give everyone a couple examples on some things that I think are cool. So why am I so interested in blockchain research, right? So personally, I think it ranges from practical to theoretical, right? It's also very interdisciplinary. So there's tons of fields in computer science, like cryptography, distributed systems, algorithmic game theory, but also a ton of other fields, right? Economics, law, everything basically. So that's why I'm so excited. I'll give everyone a. Let's see if I can, there we go. Okay. Yeah, there must be some. Let's see. Alright, cool. So one thing that has been really cool lately is this thing called verifiable delay functions. Basically, the idea is, can you prove that a certain amount of time has elapsed? Time is a very tricky thing, right? I mean, and blockchains, right now, the time stamping is, miners pretty much pick. Let me just define what you would want from a verifiable delay function. So you want a set of the algorithm which takes a security parameter lambda as well as a time parameter that outputs two public parameters, and then you want an evaluation function that takes an input and outputs an output y, as well as possibly a proof. And then you want a verification function that allows anyone to verify whether it's a valid delay or not. Forgot to mention, this is work done by Bedfish and Benedict Boons, who are also PhD students at Stanford, as well as Professor Dan Bonet and Joe Benella at NYU. And yeah, so you want eval, this function, to take around t time, no matter how many processors you have, right? So Bitcoin proof of work, you have huge mining farms, they're all doing this parallel processing. But here, you want eval to actually take a certain number of sequential steps. So that doesn't directly translate into time, but you can kind of compute a bound, and you can kind of show like it can only go so fast. Whereas you want everyone to be able to verify efficiently, exponentially faster, in fact. So it might sound fairly similar to proof of work, in fact, but it's actually pretty hard. And there's some candidate constructions lately, but yeah, it's very cool. So let me tell you about one example of a verifiable delay function application. So this is a fun example. I'm not saying everything has to do with gambling, but this is a fairly easy example. So let's say you want to run a blockchain lottery, right? With let's say 3 parties, right? See, on the blockchain, everyone needs to come to consensus, right? So you can't really have true randomness. You want to have pseudo randomness, right? So what do you guys think of this scheme, right? Where everyone submits a random value, and then you use a combination of those random values. Let's say you take the hash concatenation of those values to select the winner. Do you guys think that's secure? Okay, why is it not secure?
You can see their values and pick yours, and then
Yeah, exactly. So Eve is the nasty looking one here. She's gonna just wait for the other two to submit their values and then choose one. By guessing and checking and see which results in her being winner. So a lot of people use this commit reveal scheme, where you use a commitment scheme to basically bind yourself to a specific random value without revealing it. Does anyone see a problem with this one? So basically the idea is, let's say everyone commits to a value, right? Once everyone is committed, everyone's expected to reveal their value. But what if Eve sees that after everyone has revealed that her committed value is bad? She's just not going to submit it. So you can do things like, you can do things like requiring everyone to put down some stake and like taking that away if they if they don't reveal. But there's a limit to how secure this can be. So one very simple way to use verifiable delay functions here is basically to do the same first scheme, but basically run a verifiable delay function with maybe like 24 hours, and then Eve has no way of computing, right? As long as one person is honest here, Eve has no way of computing it if she's required to reveal within like a minute or something, right? This is super elegant. There's tons of applications here, and actually, one potential application is injective. It's one of Binance's incubation projects to prevent front-running indexes, decentralized exchanges. Okay, cool. I'll give you an example of what I'm also looking at Stanford. So, as everyone knows, Solidity is the primary programming language for smart contracts in Ethereum. But it's got a lot of problems. Does anyone see a problem with this code? This is a very simple version of the DAO code. Okay, yeah, since we're running low on time, basically you can see that Solidity has this problem where, the EVM has this problem where if you send money to someone using this call function right there, it basically goes to a contract's fallback function, right? So they can basically keep calling withdraw this code and take out all the money out of the DAO contract on the left, even stuff that they aren't entitled to. So basically what I'm working on, this is joint work with Sergio Benitez, also a student, and Yanni Zohar, as well as Dan Bonet and Clark Barrett, professor at Stanford. This is a new programming language we're making. It's inspired by Rust, so and will automatically compute upper bounds of gas usage. It'll compile the WebAssembly for execution on blockchains, and it'll also compile the COC, so people can do proofs of functional hardness. So this is pretty exciting, and we hope to present on it soon. So that's all I have. It's been really cool, looking at both industry and academia. So let me know if you have any questions about it. Yeah.
Let's move to the Q&A session. And do we need every speaker standing in the line here, or find something? Oh, you can use the microphone here. Oh, that works. Okay. Yeah. Welcome to raise any questions that you're interested or you wanted to know more. Yes.
So earlier, Ellie, you mentioned about tokens having a specific reason, or companies having a specific reason for tokenization. What are some examples of, or good examples of tokenization that you've heard?
A very good simple example is BNB. So if you're a trader, you want to lower your cost, your trading cost for 50%, you just basically use BNB as the utility to pay the transaction fee. If you're not using BNB, you're double your transaction cost. So it's very natural for everyone trade on Binance to adopt BNB. This is the use case of utility token.
Just to build on this question, so since you have said that you have been looking at many projects, can you just mention one bad token project which you think doesn't make sense and you just rejected it?
So many projects, they design a token, use one, the most important
So something that we have seen is usually a successful token design fits into the scenario where you're willing to give up some efficiency for a large increase in trust. So for scenarios where you can forego some efficiency in exchange for a lot of trust, it's a natural fit for the Bitcoin, for the blockchain. An example will be, say, online gambling, where you really want to know that the way that this game sort of smart contract from Mo3, for example, has a fairness in how it's picking its winner. And you're willing to sacrifice some efficiency. You're willing to wait, say, 15 minutes to see that result. So anything that meets that test will, at least for me, gives me a presumption that this is a valid use case of the blockchain.
I can add to that. We don't spend too much time, thinking about what projects should and should not have a token, but something that we have thought about and noticed is that there's two properties that seem, if you can satisfy them, then it might make sense to have a token. And the first one is the censorship resistance property that I mentioned, which is where you're trying to give people access to something such that nobody can prevent them from accessing it. So that's like Bitcoin and a lot of these things that are kind of trying to fight oppressive regimes and stuff like that. The other one, which is very related to your point, is transparency. So where it's very valuable that a piece of code that's running, that you can verify that it's doing what it says it's doing. So the gambling one is a perfect example because you actually care that whatever random number generator is the right thing. So those two things, I think, if you don't satisfy those, it's hard for me to see why you're using the chain. Oh, there's a third one, which is like interoperability. So if you make an ERC20 token, it's really easy for people to like integrate with it, but that's like much lower on the
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Binance donation portal that you guys are building. I know it's not perhaps in your thing, but I just read about it the other day. I'm working with a commodities trading company that we'd like to incorporate something like that. So I was wondering if you had any insight on it.
So repeat your
The Binance donation. I was wondering if you could expand on it. I just saw some headlines, but kind of how it would be used for tracking donations and stuff, if that's something that you deal with, or if not, I can just reach out to somebody else.
Yeah, actually I don't know too much details because this just has been announced like last week at the Geneva's conference, and CZ used a hand-drawn infrastructure to show to the audience what is his design for the donation platform. Basically, what I see from that hand-drawn picture is that they're gonna put donation on chain, so you can easily track the source of the money and the destination of the money to make everything traceable and transparent.
Lucas from Sloan. So two questions on stablecoin. So first, how do you view the current competitive landscape of stablecoins, given that there are like more than 50 projects right now, and we don't think there is a need for us to have like 20 versions of USD? And second, how do you think the long-term value of stablecoin when we see more of the trust issues related to stablecoins organization like USDT, and at the same time, like cash or fiat currencies becoming more efficient when Swift message, they are doing some revamp there as well, and central banks may come out with digital currency initiatives. So, thank you.
A lot of good stuff in that question. So it's interesting because when we started this project last year, no one knew what a stablecoin was. And it's very interesting to see how the market's been evolved and kind of actually I think pushed by us a bit. So to answer your question, I think the stablecoins that people are actually using that are actually legit right now are all dollar backed. So it's basically they're pots of dollars where if you put $1 into the pot, you get a stable coin. You bring the stable coin back, you get $1, and that's how they maintain stability. And so our view is that that's pretty useful in the short term, but we don't think it scales very well. So, for example, what happens when that pot of dollars gets big enough to start threatening the banking system? What happens when it starts actually getting, to the point where it can actually disrupt a lot of players who don't want it to exist? And so our view is that, and then another example, like imagine, a small economy wants to use a currency. Is it really going to want to use a pot of dollars that's controlled by a private company? It's kind of strange, to imagine that a totally private company that's, not like super well regulated will actually create a currency that people trust and rely on. And so our view at Basis is that, if you really want to scale to being something that is much bigger than, a few $billion in asset value, you have to provision for the case where people, are going to probably not want you to exist or, exert influence over you, or just generally, you have to be really, really, really careful about governance. And so our view is that, we're here for the long term. We're trying to build something that's really, really scalable, that can be much bigger than a few billion, and that really can give you the same guarantees as Bitcoin in terms of, knowing that the system is very difficult to mess with. And so I haven't seen anything that's launched that I think can really scale beyond like a few billion. So for that reason, we're not super concerned. But yeah, I think that was the main part of your question. You have like another part of your question?
Yeah, like what is the long-term advantage of stablecoin versus fiat when fiat itself is under reform and becomes more efficient?
Yeah, good question. And so it goes back to, I think, the kind of fault tolerance and reliability of the currency. So Basis in particular, we've designed it so that it can evolve into being its own independent monetary system with its own monetary policy independent fiat. And that means that it can move from being pegged to a dollar to being pegged to a basket of goods in a decentralized way with on-chain governance. And so I think in a world where fiat so first, let's talk about fiat getting more efficient, and that's actually a very difficult thing to have happen. So for example, people talk about like central bank digital currency. So if you issue a digital currency that's directly from the central bank, you are going to completely obliterate the current business models of all of the existing banks. Existing banks have a very powerful hold on the regulators. It's called an iron triangle. And I just think it's very, very, very unlikely that we're going to see a central bank, like cryptoization of the dollar beyond like private companies doing it for many years. And even when we do, it's going to be, I think it's going to be tough to push it through with all of the special interests that are fighting against it. I think it's, anyway, but to go back to it, I think that to the extent that fiat is, still kind of has issues that cause it to devalue in the long run, for example, because political cycles make the presidents want to print to boost, pump the economy right before they get elected. To the extent you can mitigate those problems and align the governance better, you actually offer material improvement in value over what the existing monetary system does. And that's what we're trying to do with Basis. So it's kind of thinking really hard about scaling and getting it to actually be good aligned governance.
I have a question for I guess on that note. So in terms of scaling, once the network's launched, what plans do you guys have for distribution?
Yeah, so our go-to-market strategy is something Ella keeps asking me about, and I don't tell her because we're very secretive about it. So I can't really talk about exactly what we're going to do with regard to distribution, but yeah, I guess if you have a more specific question. I actually don't know much about that. Maybe you might know much more.
So actually, before we touch upon the SEC, let's first touch upon, in this case, the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So you may think of it as just the company that gives you 250,000 insurance for all your deposit accounts, but it's actually it's actually the primary regulator of what we call state and non-member banks, and they're taking a very active approach in regulating banks, especially those that are backing collateralized stablecoins, like the one pot of US dollars for one pot of tokens kind of thing. So they recently had a meeting both on decentralized exchange and things similar to stablecoin. So the comparison there was, do you remember a long time ago, there was this centralized sort of pirate movie site that I called whateverdownload.com, hosted in Eastern Europe, where you can download the cracked version of Windows XP, etc. They're all obviously violating the law, and they are clear targets for enforcement actions because their domain names and servers can all be seized because they're centrally administered, right? Then came BitTorrent. I don't know how many of you know BitTorrent and EMU or whatever. So they are the file sharing peer-to-peer network on a protocol level. So they reduce the dimension in which they operate. They're no longer operating in the three-dimensional entity space. They're now operating in the flat space of a protocol. And once you get down into this lower dimension, then it wouldn't be easy for a regulator to enforce against you because there's no one to regulate against, right? So stablecoin, in basic sense, it's censorship resistant in that sense, in that there isn't a central administrator of this pot of backend collateral. It simply runs as a protocol. If everyone uses a protocol in the US, there's this thing that's called First Amendment, right? Like freedom of speech will most likely apply in this case so that you cannot censor legally, at least not in the US, a software protocol that everybody uses. So that determination, it's somewhat a consensus within the legal circle. So without changing the US Constitution, it will be really hard for even SEC to touch that determination. So it's for that reason, as long as this token does not assume a secondary use. So as long as this token is not being borrowed for fundraising purposes and for non-consumptive reasons, then SEC most likely cannot touch it.
So I have a question for two computer scientists in the panel. Have you guys compared Coq to F-Star?
I don't know F-Star. I only just learned Coq, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Coq was developed in by Ingria in France, and F-Star or F-Sharp or this kind of thing developed maintained by Microsoft Research. And I would say that Coq now, although it was developed by Ingria, but now kind of is maintained by developer community, and there are more libraries building Coq and more developers in the communities. I would say that Coq is still the best proof assistant in the world. That if you want to do this proof reasoning or whatever, you should get Coq. You should use Coq.
F-Star allows you to skip simple things.
Yeah, so in Coq you can also build tactics to try to skip this simple things, and so it's not a big issue really.
I have a question.
Can we raise hands?
Thank you for the presentation. My question is to Ella and the general network basis. And it relates to the earlier question asked earlier about stablecoin. So how do you plan to deal with the reality, like over the last few weeks? USDT has been dropped from a number of exchanges. And I assume that your solution is trying to probably deal with that sort of big challenge that it was solved. But also the issue that it's been used manipulate exchanges, or at least claim that that's been used to manipulate exchanges over the last couple of months or several months. And then the second part of my question is that it seems to me that the property that you are solving with the stablecoin is the issue of liquidity. How do you deal with the fact that for crypto, a lot of people are actually attracted to the fact that Bitcoin, for example, is deflationary. And then when you play around with the liquidity issue, you're actually reversing the deflationary property of Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Your first question is about Tether and how you know they lost banking and then they lost market cap. Are you asking? I guess I'll try to answer that. I guess so. I don't think this is a case where one bad apple ruins the whole batch. In fact, I think Tether dying is like a big opportunity for legitimate competitors to come in. I think that people who use stablecoins right now are mainly traders on exchanges, and they recognize that Tether is a very different thing than something that is like transparent and not it's just things that are more transparent and better are recognized by the market. And given that there's a real need, I think Tether dying. I mean, I think Tether is a useful product. Like it's a very very good job, but it disappearing is actually probably good for competitors, not bad. So that's Tether. Your second question was on. Sorry, I think I forgot.
It's the issue. You said you try to solve liquidity by playing around with the supply.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So Bitcoin is. Sorry, you were saying how is it attractive against something like Bitcoin?
The fact that the supply is limited, so it's somewhat deflationary compared to fiat.
Yeah. So I think of what Basis and Bitcoin are both trying to do is something called store of value. So it's like you put your value in it to store it. And you can think of stable value as like a really, really big market with a lot of different types of people, like desires in the market. Some people want something really volatile, but with some growth, and that's one segment of the market. But there's another very large segment that wants something that is less volatile with less growth, right? And so Basis addresses that segment, which is which Tether has addressed until now very well. And I think that segment is actually much bigger than just crypto traders on exchanges. And I think once we have legitimate, like not legitimate, but like Tether didn't really try to market itself. Like I think once you have something that's actually willing to market itself and make it very clear that it's operating something legitimate, that the market will expand, and you'll reach, for example, like developing countries where people's fiat currencies are devaluing and stuff like that. So, yeah.
We'll take one or two more questions over there.
Binance recently delisted 4 cryptocurrency. Can you please tell us more about the due diligence procedure? The due diligence procedure that Binance had. Delist. When we recently heard the news about delisting 4 crypto assets.
I actually cannot comment on that because we are labs focused on investing, and our listing team as a separate team have different operating standards. So they are monitoring all the project listed on Binance. There are several reasons. If the projects not meet the criteria of listing, they will inform the team. If there's still no improvement to meet the criteria, they'll carry out the listing process. So this is all what I know, but I don't know what's the specific reason that they're listing one specific project.
So this question is for Basis. So you're a stable coin, but you have a lot of venture backing. And you're going to have something that has a stable value. And at the same time, you're going to be censorship resistant. So I'm a little confused as to how your investors are going to get an ROI if you're only going to have a stable value, and at the same time, how do you stay censorship resistant?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it wasn't clear from my talk at all, so it's an excellent question. So I mentioned this in the talk. Basis is actually asset-backed early on and moves to the monetary policy phase later on. It's similar to how the U.S. started with the gold standard, moved off. But specifically, the investors care about the monetary policy phase because the monetary policy phase is where there's expansion and contraction of basis to keep the price stable. So very simply, if the price is above $1, then you expand the supply of basis. If the price is below $1, you contract the supply of basis. There's a governance token, it's called the share token, that is separate and apart from the basis token. So basis is stable in value, but the share token has upside. In particular, when basis needs to be printed, then the share tokens receive basis. When it needs to be contracted, you can think of the share tokens as getting diluted. And so they're basically they're betting on the demand for basis growing in the long run, and therefore basis needs to be printed more than needs to be contracted, and they get paid. That's pretty much it. Another way to think about it is imagine if you can take Bitcoin and split it into a stable piece and a piece that's volatile that captures all the upside. It's kind of like what's going on with basis in the decentralized phase. Does that answer your question?
I guess we could talk after.
Maybe one more.
Ella, you mentioned earlier from your own experience the differences between VC and co-investing. And you mentioned that one of the biggest differences crypto tends to be bigger at the beginning versus VC. I'm just wondering if there's a specific business reason behind it or just an observation.
This is just based on the round race, the family market. Like the traditional start out to raise the angel round, Series A, and they have a specific valuation system based on their DCF or their user base. They have a certain model to build your valuation, and based on valuation, you dilute them and raise a certain funding. So the funding you raise is actually have some relation, correlate to the economy size that you created in your company. But the ICO project, many projects, initially, they only have a white paper, have an idea, and that they go to public and share the idea, share the belief, and sell and do the crowdfunding. People buy the token, basically believe in the team going to deliver what the promise in the white paper, but there's no economy backup. That's all at all. So that's why I say if you raise a big ICO, you have a big liability to deliver it.
Okay, thanks everybody.